Just to I would like to remind you that in version 5.1, if I'm not mistaken, we've added the ability to export the rules from Rosetta, so the ability to share rules between the institutions. Maybe it would be good to have, maybe on a Basecamp site, some sort of sharing, people sharing the rules, sharing the rationale behind the rules, and for the benefit of the other institutions. So work done in one institution will be able to, other institutions will be able to benefit from. So again, thanks a lot for this very interesting presentation. And now we'll discuss different types of formats. Mentioned earlier this day in Richard Orvan's presentation, web archiving and Rosetta. We have two speakers here. The first one will be Tobias Beinert from the Bavarian State Library, and then Steve Knight, that you all know already from the National Library of New Zealand. So, please.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Steve and I want to talk about the web archiving today. We already had some information on and why web archiving is important, so I'm quite happy that I don't have to explain again the general motivation for web archiving at our institution and not at the New Zealand. Okay, I'll skip the slide about the Bavarian State Library and go directly to our approach for archiving websites. We do selective harvesting for our specialized information services, which are history, Eastern Europe, and music. And also, of course, as we are the Bavarian State Library, for materials that is concerning Bavaria. The reason for this is to keep it alive, to keep the information stored not only to catalog websites as it was done maybe 5 or 10 years ago, even in our library, and we realized that this is not a sustainable way to cite or quote or keep web resources in an archive. What we have to do is to ask the website owners or the rights holders for permissions, because we don't have a legal deposit law in Bavaria. So this is quite a hard business, which is supported by the Web Curator tool, which Steve will introduce later. We have about 30% positive answers to our requests. That sounds quite low, but it's quite common in institutions that have to seek permission. The good thing about seeking permission is that we can also seek permission for making those resources available online, and in contrast to many other web archiving institutions which can only show their archives in their reading rooms, they are all online via our catalog. We have at the moment about 1,600 websites that were chosen by the subject specialists and that are harvested regularly in every half year. We do a lot of quality control for those websites, and this is quite a distinctive feature of our web archiving activities, maybe in contrast to a domain crawl or something like that, that we really go into all those captures of single websites and try to improve the quality, to capture all the content, and so to keep it in a good shape. We make them accessible via our catalog and the gateways of the specialized information services. We do not have an own portal like the Web Archive UK, for example, for our website at the moment. And we use the Web Curator tool, as I already said, that supports all these processes, and the delivery is done via Rosetta and via the Open Wayback Viewer, which you all probably know from the Internet Archive. Yeah, how is our web archiving program integrated with Rosetta? Of course, we have to produce some zips, Rosetta zips. We take the output of the Web Curator mets, like title, capture date, and some identifiers, and map them to a Rosetta ingest mets. We unzip the WARC files, so we have unzipped WARC files in Rosetta. WARC is the container format for storing all the files that are on a website in one container. So we have walks, but the Web Curator tool produces zipped walks, and we unzip them. We do not unpack every single file of the container. Then we create a Rosetta zip, of course, via XSL and PHP, and have a submission job that we start to put them into Rosetta. I think this is quite a common thing for most of you. It looks like this. Besides the walk files, we also keep a crawl log file that is produced by the Web Curator tool, and the METS file that the Web Curator tool produces, to have those as some basic metadata information in the zip. Then there's, as it's usual in a preservation system, virus checking done. We came across an issue with 2 different virus checkers. We had installed Clamafar AV as our regular virus checker, but then ran into some performance problems with big files, and switched to Sophos. And after we implemented Sophos, we realized that there were already web archives in Rosetta that obviously have some virus problems, or viruses were detected by Sophos that were not detected by Clamafar. So we are now in the process of seeing and rechecking all the already archived content in our web archive storage with Sophos, to see if there are other issues that have not been detected by Clamafar. But this virus checking, which is not clear exactly what the virus checkers do with the WARC files, it's quite difficult, and it takes quite a lot of time. So we are probably running the virus check directly on the storage disk, and not via Rosetta, because we did it already with Rosetta, and it took quite a long for even just a couple of captures from several websites. And then we have to decide, if we detect further viruses, what are we doing with them? Do we try to repair them, keep them in the dark archive, or delete the IEs? We have not a procedure for handling those infected objects at the moment. Format identification is done with Droid. Droid validates, or it identifies the WARC file, but it does not look inside the WARC file and identifies the single files that are in the WARC container. Droid can do this, but we have configured it that we just want to identify the container itself. The technical metadata extraction is done by the New Zealand tool, and we have just realized that there's the WARC module available in Jove right now, and hope that it's sooner or later included also in Rosetta, so that we can choose which one does better metadata extraction for WARC files. We don't have experience for this at the moment. We have developed a useful service for our researchers. As it was stated in the morning and keynote speech, that there's a need to quote web archives, to cite web archives, and we realized the assignment of persistent identifiers, uniform resource names are they called in Germany, for every capture of a website that we have. We've done this with help of Rosetta. We are using the Rosetta SRU for finding an IE. If a researcher is regarding or watching a single file of a capture, he can then push a button, and this button asks Rosetta, okay, which IE does this file belong to? And then we take the Rosetta update service for getting the metadata back and including it all in one information JSON file that can then be used for a JavaScript window, which we included in the Wayback Machine, and it looks like this. You have information from the catalog, you have information from Rosetta, in this case the persistent identifier, and the capture date, and then you have the link from the web page that has been quoted. So every web page can be quoted by this method, and yeah, I think it's quite useful for our users. Delivery is done with the Open Wayback machine, which was developed by the Internet Archive. It's deployed as external viewer on the Rosetta delivery servers. We created a delivery rule, of course, and a viewer preprocessor plugin for Open Wayback, which is also available on an open source basis from our GitHub account. So if you need that, just let me know. The thing is that Open Wayback indexes the storage area itself and builds its own index so that you can navigate between URLs or snapshots in the Wayback Machine. And this does also mean that if you call a web archive, the Rosetta access rights checker starts and sees if you are allowed to check the access rights. But once you have reached the Wayback Machine, you can freely navigate in the Wayback, and Rosetta access rights are no longer applied because this navigation is just based on the Wayback Machine own index. Yeah, of course there are challenges. As I said, the Web Curator tool and mainly all harvesting technologies were developed quite a few years ago, and they have all been developed to capture HTML-based sites, and now there's a lot of more and different web technologies that are quite hard to harvest and to capture, and there are some prototypes to archive this content, but they are not, as far as I know, in production at any cultural or national library institution at the moment. And then what I see is that we have a strong focus on access aspects in research and development, that all of those institutions that have been doing web archiving for several years are now in the position to ask themselves, how do we make our websites accessible to our users, and how can we improve access and in such a way create some scientific usage of these web archives, and not just to have them somewhere hidden in the stacks of the digital archive. What may also be a cause for the lack of support for harvesting tools is that many institutions are at the moment using the archive service from the Internet Archive, which is really a useful and valuable service for many institutions. But it means, on the other hand, that harvesting tools are no longer developed or further developed, and more institutions switch to those to the web archiving service of the Internet Archive. And as we all know, it's probably not the best way to have a monopoly in digital preservation context. So we have to think about that and see if there are other alternative approaches except using an external service, and in a way to keep knowledge and infrastructure in the institutions themselves. Improving access, I already spoke about it. Steve will say some words on that as well. And of course, quality control takes a lot of time at the moment for us. Up to 20 or 30 minutes for a single capture can be, in some cases, be a regular value. And of course, as many digital preservation things, we have the problem of the human resources. There were many resources when you start to create such a service, when you put it in place, and then one after the other disappears and gets not replaced, and you can hardly keep the tool and tools going and keep the routine business, and have no resources left for developing new approaches. And that's what we are seeing in our web archiving program at the moment, unfortunately. Some perspectives. The WARC module in Jove could be probably integrated also in Rosetta. That would be, I guess, helpful. Maybe the Open Wayback can become a more integrated viewer. That's maybe depends on the user's need, but I think it would not be bad. Emulation is there have been developments with the old web viewer or a service which uses some emulation kind for displaying websites, so that you can choose an old browser to view a web archive, and so come closer to the regular look and feel that was available at the moment the capture of the website was made. So if you're interested in that, look at the old web project. That's quite interesting. Of course, there are legal challenges, and we have to see if we get access rights on our web archives due to legal changes. Then we have to implement also access rights management. At the moment, that is not the case. And a community task is, of course, preservation planning. There's been, in my eyes, very little activity because all the institutions are focused on capturing websites, harvesting websites, and on the other hand, on making their websites or web archives accessible, but not really substantial work on preservation planning. Thank you. Yeah, that's maybe a good approach.
Part of the idea behind these two sessions was that you'd see two organizations and how they do web archiving and in a different kind of way, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Tobias has pretty much covered much of what I want to say as well, so what you'll see here is maybe the same story but some different pictures. I do want to start off by acknowledging a couple of my colleagues back at National Library of New Zealand, Gillian Lee, who runs the web archiving program, and Ben O'Brien, because they put this presentation together for me to read. So, fairly standard motivation, the National Library of New Zealand Act 2003, which gave us the mandate to start collecting digital content. Illegal deposit was activated through regulations in August 2006. Our lofty mission to collect, preserve and make accessible New Zealand's documentary heritage. And the web archiving component comprises both selective harvesting and whole of domain harvesting. So this is a sort of a picture of where we're up to. So we basically have just over 7,000 individual titles, almost 30,000 web instances, so some of those are repeat harvests of these individual titles. And we also specifically collect HTML serials and monographs from the web. So there's around almost 300 HTML titles and almost 4,000 serial issues taken from the web. These are all of the various types of materials that we collect. So you can see that the bulk of them are in here. Okay, the Web Curator tool is basically a number of things. It's a content management system, it's a web scheduler, it's a crawler, it's a quality review assessment tool, all rolled into one package. So from a content management perspective, you can annotate records relating to curatorial and technical decisions that the web archiving team have made. And you can also send out permission request forms or catalog the websites within the collection management component. Unlike BSB, we do have legal deposit, so we don't have the onerous task of having to send out permissions letters each time we want to collect a new site. The scheduler can set up automatic scheduling for each web instance in a daily, weekly, monthly, annually, whatever kind of timetable you want to use. The crawler is currently Heritrix 1.14.1, and anybody who's familiar with Heritrix will be asking themselves the question, why the hell are they on 1.14.1? And we'll have a bit of an answer to that a little later on. Once harvesting's complete, there's a number of tools you can use to check the quality of what you've captured before you actually decide to archive it. And there's a number of out-of-the-box reporting tools as well, crawler activity reports showing what's been crawled, and statistics about the actual quantity and quality of the crawl. This is the general workflow, reading from top to bottom, authorizations, and then targets, and then target instances. With the authorizations, you can add the permission records and create a range of various harvest authorization records for legal deposit or for non-legal deposit material, it doesn't matter, but there's a whole range of separate authorization components to the system. As I mentioned before, a target is a website. So a record is created for each website, and within that record you can schedule how frequently you want the harvest to run, and you can annotate actions related to that website. In the target instance layer, when a harvest is scheduled, the target instance is created within the Web Curator tool, and once the harvest is complete, you open that instance to quality review the site before making the decision to to archive the website or to reject it. If content hasn't been picked up during a web harvest, you can use the review QA tool, and that's part of the WCT to pick up missing content. You can also prune unwanted pages from an instance that might accidentally have been picked up in the harvest. Once you've decided to archive the web instance, you just press the archive button, and the WCT Rosetta plugin does its stuff. So when the website's submitted to the archive, a SIP number is generated in Rosetta and populated into WCT. A very useful function. It makes it a lot easier to understand where an object is in the processes. So whether, particularly if an instance doesn't actually make it into permanent and it's lying around somewhere in technical analyst workbench, instead of being sent through, you can actually search for it within the system in a simple kind of manner. Short catalogue records are created before a website or HTML serial is archived. The catalogue number is added to the target record. Our configuration is set up so that no website can be archived without a catalogue record. And it's a very deliberate decision that we didn't want to get into a situation where we had to do retrospective cataloguing on websites. And there's an issue here for anybody sort of starting off in the digital preservation workspace space to consider how they want to combine the things around cataloging and indexing in the digital, because we don't want to end up with a whole bunch of digital stuff lying around in file systems unknown and unrecorded. Once the item is catalogued, it's available to view online via Primo, and clicking in the catalogue record opens the WARC viewer in Rosetta. So in this case, you can see at the top of the screen that we added the harvest date into the viewer so that people can tell that it's an archive copy and not a live copy. And the issue of live and archive copies is important when you consider the ownership of a website and the competing drivers for recognition of where the website comes from and where you are actually when you're looking at something. And by that I mean, and we have occasion where we make our we wouldn't, in some instance, we would not make this website viewable, but we would direct traffic directly out to the live record so that the live record in that institution is actually driving the traffic. But when that is no longer available in a live sense, that's when we would switch across to the archived copy. The information here for the dates comes from the metadata attached to the SIP in Rosetta. The procedure for harvesting HTML serials and HTML monographs, we use the same WCT module, but different agencies to keep the workflows separate. When serials are ingested to Rosetta from WCT, there's a place where you can add the serial issue and date before archiving. And here you can see the various bits of details. Oops, no, that's not true. Here you can see the various kind of details that are able to be added to the HTML kind of target when you're getting it ready for delivery. An example of an HTML serial issue being delivered through Primo from Rosetta using the WARC viewer. This is the basic view of the integration with Rosetta, sort of reading left to right from user to WCT and into Rosetta. WCT can be configured to talk to Rosetta with a single Rosetta user for all, or you can use individual WCT users to authenticate with Rosetta. WCT transfers the web harvest files via FTP to an intermediate storage location, what we call the NDVHA deposit service, and then the Rosetta deposit process is initiated via a web service call. Viewers, Tobias sort of went through this. The ones that are of most interest to us at the moment are the WARC viewers, which is effectively a legacy viewer. It's kind of simple to implement, but it's old. It only holds older WARC and CDX formats, and it struggles to replay a lot of newer technology websites. So it's an issue there for us. We're just moving towards Open Wayback. It's kind of more complex, but it's worth it. Combined with newer harvesting tools, there's significantly better replay of web harvests. It'll be quite interesting to see if Ofer is going to talk to us about, when he talks to us about the AAAF viewer and the capabilities there, whether or not there'll be something around playback of websites and the like, or even if it's capable. Challenges for us, websites are becoming more and more difficult to capture. WCT was released in 2007. There's been some development over time, but it actually needs a significant overhaul. And so there's a conversation that we need to have internally within National Library of New Zealand about whether or not we want to exit WCT, whether or not we work with other users with WCT to actually bring it up to scratch, understand what the other opportunities are around Archive It and NetArchive Suite, and various other tools such as Web Recorder IO, and even a basic upgrade from 1.14.1 of Heritrix to Heritrix 3 would probably be useful. Much of our time is spent quality reviewing content. Web harvesting is really labor intensive, and we'd like to see a lot more automated quality assurance processes. And from a curatorial perspective, there's always this nagging feeling in the back of your head that you haven't actually captured everything. And so how do you actually know that you have captured anything without going through page after page? And if you've got a 20,000 page website, it's just impossible. So the QA tools need to be much more sophisticated than they are at the moment. Tobias talked about this as well. Improved access is needed. We need full text indexing of websites. At the moment, you can view the website and you can tab your way through the pages, but there's no index that allows for any deeper searching of content across the Web Archive collection. And this is a problem that's writ large in the whole of domain harvest, where we've got something about 110, 120 terabytes of web data that we can't provide meaningful access to. And I emphasize the word meaningful. There's a lot of talk about data and data sets and all that kind of stuff, but there's much less talk about how you make them useful to people that aren't necessarily used to using them. And there's an idea around, particularly in organizations like libraries and archives and national institutions, that you've got a role in enabling citizenship and democracy and all of those kinds of things. And we need to be really careful that we don't just throw data sets out and sort of say, here you go, knock yourselves out. We need to be a lot more intentional about how we put 120 terabytes out into the wider community. We also need to be able to link to content within a website. So for citation purposes, you need to be able to pick and choose, not just at the IE level, the HTML serial or the website, but to be able to find stuff within a website that you also want to be able to cite. Again, something that Tobias picked up in JavaScript and all of those kinds of things. Thank you.